it's Sarah, and today I thought I would do a review video for you guys. This review is very tentative. It's more of like a discussion of sorts. It's hard to review this book, so I thought I would just go ahead and make a video about my thoughts surrounding it, what I thought about the whole entire book and the way it was structured and written, and you know, the things that went on and the characters. And it's a very complicated book and it's a very complicated series, so my review is going to be very complicated. That being said, if you are, you know, wanting to pick this book up and need a little bit more motivation, or you've picked it up multiple times and can't get through it, this might help you push through that and kind of, you know, get an understanding of really what the book is about and what it is, you know, how it's structured and things like that, because it is really a hard book to read. So yeah, I thought I would just say that before we get started, but let's jump into the review. Okay, so the book that I'm going to be reviewing today is Gardens of the Moon by Steven Erikson. This is the first book in the Malice Book of the Fallen series. This series is a 10-book series, and it also has a spin-off series written by a different author named Ian Esselmont. I think that's how you say his name. The two authors, Ian Esselmont and Steven Erikson, created this world together, and they both are writing separate stories based in this world. And so this is kind of like a dual series, I guess. Like I said, this series has 10 books in it, and it kind of has a little bit of an interesting history behind it and how it was published. So I'll go into that a little bit more once we start talking about the writing style and what the book actually contains. But yeah, and this book right here starts off the series with a handful of characters, and basically the premise behind it is that there is this empire called the Malazan Empire, and they are taking over the world, taking over the continent, I guess. And there's a very loud frickin' airplane outside, and you probably can hear it.
I was just a poor boy, though my story seldom told. La la, la 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 la.
Where was I at? The continent, so they're trying to take over the continent. I'm just gonna call it that, just, yeah, world, whatever. What we know of the world, basically. And they have a couple of cities left to overthrow, and so you have a band of characters fighting for the Malazan Empire, and then you also have characters who are fighting against the Malazan Empire, trying to keep their city and not allow it to be overtaken by the Empress. And we also have some history going on in here where, you know, there was an emperor who had control of the Malazan Empire, and then he got defeated, and now we have an empress. And so that was very interesting, I think, and there's a lot that I want to talk about towards that and the roles that Steven Erikson gives his characters. But besides that, I think that the history behind it was really interesting, because a lot of the people who were fighting for the empire now had to deal with fighting for a new emperor or empress, and so there's a lot of intrigue with that, and you know, that's why I was saying tentative relationships with the empire. There is some, I say some because this is an intro book. There is magic in this story, and it is very complex and complicated, and you don't really know what's going on and how it is, you know, active in this world, but there is magic, and it has to do with the gods and pulling energy, or I guess, you know, magic from their powers and using them, and it's very fascinating, and the way that the magic is set up is, like I said, very confusing, but at the same time, like, really cool and different than what I've ever read before. Yeah, they can kind of jump through places and use it to, you know, fight and things like that, so it's really cool. And what else do we have in here that's kind of unique? There's a lot of, sorry, my neighbor just got home, and then he got out of his car, and it wasn't my neighbor, it was somebody else. We're driving his truck. Okay, anyway, this is gonna be awkward because they're gonna look up here and see me, but whatever. Deal with it. Life of a booktuber. Yeah, it has a lot of intrigue. There's some really cool things that happen in here. There's some really cool relationships. There's really cool stuff pertaining to the gods, and it's just all around a really awesome story. And yeah, I'm gonna leave you there with that premise, because I could go on for hours about what this book's about, because that's just how jam-packed full it is. Okay, and also before I go on, if you, like I said, are wanting to pick up this book and have found a hard time picking it up, I highly, 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 highly recommend reading it with somebody who has already read it before. If you don't have that opportunity, I'm going to link down below Caitlin over at Kitty G, her Goodreads group. She's currently on book 5 of this series. Yeah, book 5 of this series, but all of the threads are still open. So there's a lot of discussions that go on throughout this story, and any part, if you have struggled with it or you're confused about it, there are some really great people who know about this series and know about, you know, have read it or are currently reading it and have, you know, read the first book down in this Goodreads group. So I highly recommend going and checking that out, especially if you kind of don't understand, or if you've read this book and still are like, I really don't understand what went on in this story. Yeah, I would really, really recommend going and checking out the Goodreads group, because there are just some really awesome discussions that took place and really awesome informative things that went on in that group. So highly recommend, and like I said, she keeps her threads open, so if you would like to go and check out any of the books, like if you're stuck on any of the books in this series, they are all linked down in the description. I had the most amazing friends helping me through this book, especially Michael from Bitten by a Radioactive Book. He's kind of a guru on the Malzahn Empire, and he's read all of the books, and he knows the most about the series, and he was so helpful. And the way that you can talk about this series is really unique, because you can kind of go either way with how it's written. So if you predict something, you could be right, but you could also be completely wrong, because you really have no idea. So that was really cool, because reading it with somebody and having someone help me through it, especially someone who knows about it, is like, it's really just an awesome experience to, like, you know, play ideas off of each other and have somebody have the same theories, or, you know, have other theories that could possibly be there, because there is no one true way of knowing what's going to happen until you get to the part where it happens. So really awesome. So let's talk about the writing style. This is like the main thing I want to talk about, because it is so different than any other book out there. The writing style in this book is very complex, very hidden. It's very very flowery, very, you know, open for interpretation, very, yeah, just, I think complex pretty much sums it up. There's a lot that's hidden in this story, and with the help of my friends, I kind of figured out my way around certain things and kind of fell into the writing style really quickly. I will say that you will fall into it, and you will understand how Steven Erikson writes. It may take this book, it may take 2 books, but once you understand how he writes and you understand the flow of things, it's really easy to fall into. The best way I can explain it, and this, you guys are gonna laugh at me, is Shakespeare. And I always describe Shakespeare's writing as like a light bulb that goes off. So you can read Shakespeare, you can read a whole play and not understand it, but that moment that you understand it, it all makes sense. So like the moment you're like, oh yeah, that's what he's trying to say, that light bulb clicks on and you're like, oh, that's totally what he meant to say. And that's, it just kind of is like that. And this book is very similar to that. Like once you understand the clues that are given to you and you understand how he's writing, it just immediately clicks. And especially for me, I mean I'm going off of experience here, and I'm, you know, I can't say that for every single person, but for me it definitely just clicked right on, and I was like, that's exactly where he's going, that's what's gonna happen. And of course, you know, my theories were wrong some of the time they're right, but that's the beauty of it. You just, yeah, you never know. And I will say, after reading this book, there's no book that I can't tackle, or at least I feel that way. It's empowered me to be like that, yeah, that, and if the book isn't complex, it feels a little bit lackluster, but that's okay. This book definitely has that effect on me. And as I was saying with the writing style, there's some history behind how this got published, and I thought I would share it with you guys. This book was written 10 years before it was published, and this is, I think, my understanding of how it went. And you can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong of like the timeline of it all, but I'm pretty sure that Steven Erikson wanted to publish this book 10 years before it actually got published, and he tried going to many different publishing houses here in America. He tried, you know, talking to a lot of, you know, different publishers, and this was back before you could self-publish books, and a lot of publishers declined him because his writing was so unique and because it was not written like normal fantasy in this time. And so he actually went overseas to England and found a publisher who wanted to publish his book so badly that he persevered and published it. Took 10 years, and I'm told that the writing between Gardens of the Moon and the second book, Dead House Gates, is like the biggest improvement out of, you know, you can get as exaggerated as you want, but has a very, 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 very big improvement oh my gosh, there's someone walking by, and he's gonna look up here, and he's gonna see me, and he is gone. Okay. It's a very big improvement from book 1 to book 2, just in terms of writing and like, I guess perfecting the way he wants to write. So I'm really excited to jump into book 2 for that reason. I thought that was really interesting that no one wanted to publish this book and then he went overseas and someone did, and that's really cool. So yeah, so I'm not going to do my normal review style where I break it down into world and characters and things like that because it's just way too much. One thing I do want to talk about is gender roles and how Steven Erikson writes genders in this story, and how I think it's different than other fantasy stories. I really strongly believe that any one person can be anything that they want to be, and they shouldn't be restricted by gender roles, and they shouldn't be restricted by, you know, the norms and all of that type of thing. And in fantasy we'll see a lot of characters who are, you know, strong women, or women who are portrayed as, you know, the kick-ass character, which is really awesome because in the past it has always been that way. Women were more damsel in distresses and needed to be saved, and they weren't necessarily fighting for themselves and things like that. But again, I think that that is kind of missing the mark with the gender role, and it's not necessarily that we have to put women in these roles where, you know, they have to be kick-ass or they have to be damsels in distresses. I think that looking at it like that is defeating the purpose of trying to come outside of gender roles. Steven Erikson does a great job of not even introducing the character's gender until you've already gotten a couple of paragraphs of the character. So as you're reading, you don't really focus on whether it's a boy or girl. You're focusing on, well, you're focusing on where the hell you're at and what's going on, but you're also focusing on like who the character is and what they do, not necessarily what their gender is. So they could be an empress, or they could be a, you know, second hand to the empress, or they could be some sort of lonely, you know, guardsman. It doesn't matter that there's no guardsman. You don't get any POV from guardsmen, but that's just an example. It doesn't necessarily matter about their gender, it's more of their role in the story and what they have to play. And I feel like that in itself is evolutionary. And I feel like a lot of writers should take tips from that. But yeah, once we introduce, you know, a character is kick-ass, or a character does something, instead of, oh, a female character does something or a male character does something, that eliminates the gender roles in itself. And I really want to talk about that because about halfway through I realized that Steven Erikson had a certain way of writing roles for characters, and how he went about it was just so different than I've ever read before, and I really appreciated it, and I really liked that in the story, one of the driving forces for it. Okay, so I gabbed long enough about this story. I think you kind of have an idea of the writing style and certain things that I liked about it. I also really liked the characters in the story. They were pretty endearing, easy to fall into. I feel like I have a grip on who they are as characters, and that's hard to distinguish because, like I said, there is so much going on in this world and so much going on with the characters and things that you have no clue about, but I do think that, you know, once you start grasping things, it is easier to grasp. I know the last, like, big chunk, maybe 100, 200 pages of the story, I read with no problems. I wasn't confused. You know, the ending was a little bit confusing, but I wasn't confused in the sense where I was like, oh, I don't know what's going on, or I was just more of like going with the flow. That's kind of how you have to approach the story, is just kind of go with the flow, because that's just the best way to do it. So yeah, you're not going to find out anything about the world, you're not going to find out anything about different types of people in this world. Steven Erikson is going to make a bigger deal about different types of people, different, not really creatures, but just like different parts of the world and different people who play parts in that world, and yeah, you're not going to find out about that. You kind of just have to take it in and absorb it, and if you don't understand it, that's okay, because it does come back up, and it does, you know, reveal itself later on, and you don't necessarily need to know right away who that character is, because whenever Steven Erikson wants you to know who he really is, you're gonna know. So, yeah, I don't know. It's very different type of fantasy novel. I want to recommend this book to anybody who's up for a challenge, who wants something different, who is kind of stuck in this whole fantasy formula where it's like the same stories over and over. This will definitely change that, and if you haven't read it, then I highly recommend reading it for that reason. I do think that's all I wanted to say about this book. I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars just because I was confused for more than half of it, and I feel like there's a lot that could be improved on, so I'm excited to get on to the next books in the series. I do know that it gets better, and I'm really excited to find out how it gets better. So recommend picking this up if you want a different book, and also recommend reading it with friends, and if you don't have the opportunity to, like I said, I will link the Goodreads group down below where they are currently reading this series. But that's pretty much all that I have for this book. Leave your comments down below about anything pertaining to the book, if you liked or disliked the book, if you're stuck in it, if you have any issues with it, leave it down below. I'm really excited to open up the comments for this story because I feel like there is so much that people can say about it, and I'm really interested to see what you guys have to say. And yeah, if you plan on picking it up, let me know down below, and if you're intimidated by it, let me know, because maybe I can change some things for it and, you know, talk you over to the dark side about it. And yeah, I just want to stress that if I can read and understand it, you can read it and understand it. That is a very accurate thing, and yeah, I think that's all I really have for this video, guys. I keep spinning in this chair. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you have a great day. I hope that you pick up this book, and I will see you in the next one. Read more books.